It's time for the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. Jeff Chadiha, NFL Network. It is Eric Eager, Sumer Sports, Soren Petro, Sports Radio 810 WHB. We talk Kansas City Chiefs here on the Red, Gold, and Bold. Concerns for the defensive line. Charles Omenihu, who's suspended for 6 games. I don't think the Chiefs thought it was going to be that long. Chris Jones is still out, even though Brett Veach says they're not trading him. How concerned should they be about the defensive line? We'll preview the defensive backs. Here's Steve Spagnuolo's thoughts about some of the DBs. What is Drew Tranquill's role on this team? Adam Teicher of ESPN, Chiefs reporter, says the Chiefs receivers are better than expected. Are they better this year than last year? How good are they? We'll talk about that. The latest on the injuries. Kadarius Toney and Isaiah Pacheco. Chiefs are optimistic they're back for week 1, but L'Jarius Sneed continues to be out. Jody Fortson down with his shoulder. What does it all mean? We'll also talk about what we want to see in this first preseason game against the New Orleans Saints. It's all coming up right now on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.
You're listening to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Chiefs on planet Earth, breaking down the Chiefs like no one else can. Red, Gold, and Bold is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro. Jeff Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Eric Eager is the vice president of research and development for Sumer Sports. Soren Petro is the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. The Red, Gold, and Bold podcast is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are the hosts of the best Chiefs podcast, Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro.
Yes, indeed. It is time to talk about the Kansas City Chiefs, and it starts with the defensive line today. Thanks for joining us. If you're catching us via the podcast, remember, we stream live. You can be a part of the chat room if you're with us Tuesday nights, either at 8 or 9 p.m. Watch our Twitters. Follow us on the Twitter, and you know what time it's going to be, at least until the season gets going. We're probably brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, as you heard. Don't wait. Right now, you can get your seal coating done before the weather turns cold. Important if you've got a parking lot. Weekends are booking up fast. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. Jeff, Charles Omenihu gets 6 games. Chris Jones, we'll just put these together. He's still out. How much of a concern should this be for the Kansas City Chiefs?
Significant, because you're talking about a defense that relies heavily on the pass rush to be the catalyst. And so, you know, I think you raised the point in the on your radio show and the teased into the segment about just what did they expect they were going to get. We knew that he had some legal issues when he signed to come here, and that there was always the possibility of a suspension. 6 games seems pretty extreme. At least would have made me feel a bit queasier about doing something with him. But that's, as Andy Reid said, it is what it is now. But it's a huge blow on that end of it. We'll start with Omenihu just because of his versatility. He's the veteran. He's the player you brought in to be a big chess piece next to Chris Jones, to be able to vary up some of the things you did with that defensive line, or what Spagnuolo did with the defensive line. And so, yeah, he's going to impact FAU. He's going to impact George Karlaftis. He's going to impact Mike Dana, everything that comes with him, because he was supposed to be alongside Chris Jones that 1-2 punch. And so without it, and with Chris Jones not being in camp, Chris Jones will play at some point, but yeah, it's a huge blow.
By the way, I like this one. You're making us choose between Red, Gold, and Bold and Hard Knocks and the Jets. Then can't you stream Hard Knocks? I'm going to watch Hard Knocks later. That's what I'm going to do. I'm sorry, we didn't think about that.
Forgot it was on.
This is the time we've always gone. I mean, in this, between our 2 podcasts, if people don't check out our 2 Deep NFL podcast, we did that one earlier. So we're doing Red, Gold, and Bold now. It was not to try to make people choose between the 2.
It's 2023. You can watch any show whenever you want to watch it.
I know, that's what I thought.
Lord.
You know, it's interesting. All right, Eric, the combination of Omenihu out 6 games, Chris Jones still out. Combination of the 2, how big a problem is this for the Chiefs?
It's not great. I mean, whenever they've really struggled, to Jeff's point, it's because they can't get a pass rush. And then in 2021, um, they tried to move Jones outside. They tried to get pushed from guys like Jerron Reed, players like that, and it just didn't work, and the defense was terrible. You could see similar situations. I'm with Jeff. I think Jones is going to show up. My question about Jones, I said this on the two deep podcast just a little bit ago. I wonder about how good Jones is going to be. I think Omenihu would have come in here and kind of curbed some of the inevitable regression in Chris Jones from holding out, but also just the fact that he played so well last year that you can only really earmark regression there. So it hurts them a lot. And he's supposed to be an inside outside guy. He's supposed to be able to play the parts where players do and don't, like if Coburn doesn't develop, or guys like Michael Dana and FAU and Karlaftis don't develop. He's supposed to be kind of like playing end if the ends don't work, interior if the interior guys don't work, and not having him for the first 6 games is going to hurt them.
The first 6 games, if people don't remember the schedule, they're going to open with the Lions, at Jacksonville, home for the Bears, at the Jets, at the Vikings, versus the Broncos. Those are the 6 games that they've got coming out of the chute. And Omenihu, they know they're going to be without Chris Jones. They don't know yet. Brett Veach said they are not trading Chris Jones. So he's there. We talked a little bit on our 2 Deep about the leverage that may or may not be there, whether it's team or player, with franchise tags available. Eric talked about the $32 million hit. It would be, it's all D-line, not just D tackles. I made that mistake today on the show, just thinking in terms of D tackles, but it's all D line, right? So that gets very expensive when you throw in the defensive end numbers, but it still means no long-term effect for a player that's turning the corner at the age of 30. Jeff, I mean, I don't know, like where he's not going to not play, right? Like I still don't see this. And for me, I'm not concerned. For not being signed by the first preseason game is the first thing to me. Most people think he just wants to miss St. Joe. He had a tweet today saying how much he loves Kansas City. Last year, apparently 4 days before he signed, he sent out almost exactly the same tweet. People are taking that to mean he'll be signing in 4 days. What do you take it all to mean?
I guess I don't think, given the situation, given what's happened with the Omenihu, given how far this has gone, that I don't think this is just about Chris Jones wanting to stay out of St. Joe. I feel like Chris Jones is in a situation where he's got his last chance at a really big payday, a really big extension, and he's going to milk it for all it's worth. And that he knows the Chiefs have been very reluctant to pay guys his age, at his level of experience, big money. And so that's where I think this has always been at. And I always caution people to not get too deep into the Chiefs are really optimistic about this, or this tweet says that, or whatever. Like, all you know is what's in Chris Jones's head and what the Chiefs are putting on paper. And if it was anything close by now, it would have been done. Let's face it, there's a lot of reasons for it to be done and be over with. If it was done in May, that would tell me that they were a lot closer on this. I don't think they're as close as people, at least the Chiefs, have been putting out there. I think the Chiefs don't want to go past a certain number. And I feel like Chris Jones has leverage here. And so, yeah, is he going to play? Yeah, because he's got $20 million coming to him this season. But when you talk about getting concerned, I think we have to really kind of define what concern is, because we have these conversations about him, but we don't really indicate what's the best case scenario. The best case scenario is that the Chiefs get a deal done and he plays whatever out his career here. But in reality, he could also not get a deal done and play one season to be done. So when you mentioned concern, like, what would be concerning for you? Not getting a deal done? We know he's playing, right?
I mean, you never know. Like, he's old. He's probably about the same age, actually, as Trent Williams when he, sat out till the last 6 games and then played the last 6 games for Washington.
Yeah, but that was when fines weren't as outrageous, right? Like,
well, I not to be a jerk, Eric, but you told us that Chris Jones would be at camp because there's no way he's going to sit out $50,000 a day.
I did.
Was there a bet on that one? Was there a stake on that?
I mean,
No, because Soren said the exact same freaking thing.
Okay, yeah. That's crazy.
no, I didn't.
Yeah, you did.
I wasn't at. Well, first of all, I respect your opinion. So I thought in my head, I thought he was going to hold out. But when you say he's not, I'm like, okay, Eric knows what he's talking about. And I think you're right on, and have been right on every player but him, right? Unless Jonathan Taylor, we're going to see how that ends up going in his rehab as he left camp. We talked about in our other podcast, but I don't think Chris Jones marches to the beat of the same drum. And I think he knows there's a lot more money coming in a new contract. I think the holdout is almost a good sign for things getting done, because if he was going to play, if it was like, if I don't get what I want, I'm going to play this year and then I'll go back at it next year. And I think he'd be in, because he wouldn't want to lose about $1 million. But I think if you're going to get a 20, 30, $40 million signing bonus, and you're going to get 60 to 70 to $80 million guaranteed, then losing the $1 million is, I'll take it out of the bonus, right? I think you see it as, cost of doing business, saving face. I actually think from that standpoint, Eric, I think the holdout, he's in a unique situation. I think you're right almost all the time on that. But his unique situation, the fact that he's a little bit different, is why he's doing this. And I do think it may actually be a good sign, because I don't think he was.
One question that I have, though, because I feel like we dealt with this last year with Orlando Brown, where the Chiefs offered him a fairly reasonable contract. His side balked, and the media, and I'm not saying the media, like, you guys are obviously the best, but like the whole intelligentsia of Chiefs, the people who cover the Chiefs overall are all like talking about it like it's a horse race, when the horse has been in the stable for months, right? Like, and I think, with Orlando Brown, that was the same thing. Everybody's like, oh, the talks between the Chiefs and Orlando Brown. It's like, you do a little digging, you're like, guys, we haven't talked in months, right? And it's just, and I think you're right that Jones is a little bit of a different animal here, but so was Orlando Brown in a way, right? Like, Orlando Brown, sat out. Now, he didn't have to pay fines, but he sat out, came back after a couple weeks or a few days. I mean, I can't remember the timeline, but it was a similar idea where, like, everybody was assuming that both sides were negotiating in good faith. In reality, the Chiefs were negotiating in good faith, and the player side was digging in their heels, and nothing got done. And that could be what's going on right now with Jones and the Chiefs. Like, because you look at Brett Veach, and I watched some of the clips, and I obviously talked to Sam and read his column and stuff. And Jesse, it's like, Brett Veach sounded exasperated yesterday, right, at this idea that he wasn't signed. And I think that's, I don't think that they're particularly close.
I don't think they're particularly close either. I get the vibe that the Chiefs have made a legitimate offer. I mean, one that's in the, more in the realm of what could get it done. And listen, if he does walk in the last day of St. Joe or first day after St. Joe, then it was about training camp, right? Can we at least, and we should point out, this was a 30-day trip to St. Joe. They started early because the team starts 4 days early or 3 days early on the Thursday night opener. I remember one year they were up there for 22 days. They're up there for 30 days. There aren't many teams that still go to, a college and do it. I'm going to tell you quietly, there are a lot of players bitching about how long they're in St. Joe. Now they don't want to get paid $50,000 per, but I do think I am quite optimistic that he just wants no part of St. Joe. That they're now close enough that in the last 48 hours of St. Joe, suddenly you'll see them figure out whatever details are there, and he comes marching in on the 18th.
So let me ask you this. So why would you think that means more to him than money, missing training camp?
Because there's lots more coming. Like I said, because he's going to get a check for 30 or 20, 30, 40. I'd have to look at what the going rate is on the signing bonus. He's going to get a monster check, right? So if you just look at it, how much money is he going to get right now, this year, in the next month or two? It's still going to be a lot. I mean, like that, he's just knocking that $1 million off the signing bonus. Listen, I'm with you, but people don't think like me, right? Or they don't they think different.
Yeah.
So
I think would find it hard to believe that he and his agent aren't sitting there thinking, if you can ride this out and we get to free agency, there's a lot more money to be made out there. That's what I think is driving this. Now, it's a nice ancillary benefit to not have to be up in St. Joe, but I don't think you come this far just to say, hey, you know, I'm kicking up my heels and I don't have to be up there in Missouri Western in the dorm room for 30 days. I think this is all about him understanding I've made enough money to where I can afford to take these fines. I've made enough money to where I can determine what I want. And Aaron Donald got $90 million in guaranteed money when he signed his last deal. TJ Watt got $80 million in guaranteed money. I just don't believe Chris Jones is going to sit here and take $60 million, $50 million in guaranteed money and be like, hey, this is good enough to stay put. I just think, to your point, I think he's wired differently. And I think players get we've seen it with all around the league. Lamar Jackson, all these running backs, whoever it is, receivers. You had DBs like Buda Baker like all these guys want money. And so to go this far down the road, I think it's all about money.
Okay. Eric, 3rd down and 8. Omenihu is suspended for 6 games, and Chris Jones is not ready to play for whatever reason, either still holding out or just came in a deal. What does the Chiefs front look like in that situation? Who
3rd and 8. I think they run a 3-3-5 like they came out with today. And I think it's FAU, Karlaftis on the edge, and I think it's Michael Dana over the center. And then I think it's Chanel, Drew Tranquil, and Bolton as the 3 linebackers.
Not Willie Gay.
I mean, that's how they opened today.
Okay, I just want to make sure so Tommy Moe's head doesn't explode. What you're getting at, because he's always wanting Willie Gay to be rushing the passer. So I just figured we'd get right to that before he had time to chat it. FAU is the one that I would draw. The comments that have been made by Steve Spagnuolo and I might even be able to get those together really quick about him, and by Andy Reid, have not been glowing in terms like, you know, are we just because he's picked number 31 giving him that job, you know, by default? And in reality, maybe we need to be taking a longer look at that. And if that's the case, how concerning is that?
It's concerning. I mean, what I'm hearing is the offensive line is doing really well at camp, which the other side of that is, you know, Brooke was talking to us on the 2D podcast. That can mean the offensive line is doing great. That can also mean the defensive line is not doing, doing well at all. I would be concerned, right? Like, you know, pass rushers taken in that kind of 15 to 32 range, like it generally, like they're disappointing most of it. Like it's just like quarterbacks taken then, right? Like the truly great elite edge rushers, they're taken in the first 12 picks, 15 picks. And so when you take a guy at the end of the first round, they're by definition, even though they're first round picks and should be starters in year 1, they're at those positions, tackle, edge, quarterback, they're developmental projects. So it doesn't surprise me. But it's still concerning that they're not praising him even for his development.
Let me let you hear what Steve Spagnuolo had to say today about Felix Anudike-Uzomah, and you tell me what you think of where he feels his progress is.
Yeah, you pinned you hit it right on the nose, because he does look a lot more comfortable. Volume's heavy for him right now. His pitch count has gone up in the last week. A, because the guys that have been nicked up, but B, because he's kind of earned it. And he's coming along and missed all that time we talked about in OTAs. But I think he's making up for it now, and hopefully he'll do that.
Is that a ringing endorsement in your opinion, Jeff?
Yeah, I think Spagnuolo is typically tough on rookies. You got to earn his trust. And to Eric's point, most guys who come out of college now, unless they're just physical freaks, are going to have to go through some kind of growth, learning curve in the NFL, because in college, the guys who are rushing the passer in college or having success are usually just guys who are really athletic, sometimes undersized, and oftentimes playing against offensive tackles who aren't nearly as athletic as what they see in the NFL. So the first thing they're going to see is just a better athlete across from them. And they're going to see somebody who is a lot more technically sound, and you have to learn how to use your hands better. You got to learn how to use your feet better. You got to learn how to play off the guy next to you better. You got to learn how to set people up better. All these things that like he's probably never had to do at the college level. And it's not just him. Like most of these dudes who Karlaftis was in the same boat. You know, there was like when Karlaftis came out, there were 4 or 5 guys who were amazing pass rushers, exceptional guys, and they all had to learn how to play. Jermaine Johnson was running with the twos with the New York Jets, and he was supposed to be like a top 10 pick. And so I don't hold it against him. You know, Karlaftis learned as he went through the season. Clearly, FAU is going to be out there a lot more maybe than they anticipated, given what's happened with Omenihu. But, you know, he's a young guy. He's a smart guy. He's got skills. I'm sure he'll find his way.
When it comes to your parking lots, why risk accidents and liability? You can get your parking lot restriped today. Brightly striped lot will cut down on accidents. Keep your parking lot safer, as safe as possible. Right now, you can get help with your parking lot. GannAsphalt.com. That's Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Call 816-484-3338. Make sure you tell them you heard about it here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. We're going to break down the defensive backs. Let's turn our attention there, gentlemen. We know that last year they had great production from their rookie class. They've got a couple of more rookies, one drafted, one not drafted. We'll hear Steve Spagnuolo on that. But let's start with the guys that are obviously going to have a lot put on them. That's the second-year crew. Steve Spagnuolo talking today about their progress.
The expectation for the guys that have been here is that they would take this thing up a notch and wouldn't make those same mistakes that they made last year at this time. Now, for the most part, that has happened. But there have been some guys where focus wasn't great. And I look at them and say, you know, you made that same mistake last year. You shouldn't be making that now. So that's that group. For the most part, they've been pretty good. At times it's up and down, but they're light years ahead of where they were last year. So that part's good. And, you know, in the midst of the middle of training camp, everybody has an off play here or there. But the expectations for them are so much higher now than they were a year ago. And then we try to keep that expectation up high.
Should the expectations be higher, Eric? You're the guy that spent a lot of time quantifying that coverage is more important than pass rush, but also that it's much more volatile than pass rush from year to year. How much do you just count on, okay, year 2, all these second-year guys are better?
I think it's speculative. I mean, the fact of the matter is, until he tore his ACL, Najee Johnson was playing over both of the guys that were playing last year, right? And that, you know, we talked about this on the show countless times, which is to say, just because Jalen Watson and Joshua Williams were decent last year doesn't mean that one wasn't a 7th-round pick and one wasn't a 4th-round pick at a Division II school. So when Najee Johnson was starting, everybody was like, oh, this is great development for him. It's like, is that true? Or are some of the other guys a little bit down as far as coming back from their first season? So I hope that they're better for sure as a Chiefs fan. They probably need to be better because L'Jarius Sneed looks like he is missing time, and that, you know, these injuries oftentimes will linger into the regular season. So that's rough. Trent McDuffie played really well as a rookie, but you're also baking in a lot of improvement for him. So there needs to be a lot of, in my opinion, you know, you need at least one of those young guys to step up alongside Sneed and McDuffie and improve off of what was already a good season last year.
Jeff, are you confident the second-year guys will be better? Is that something that has to happen for this team, particularly with what's going on up front on the defensive line right now?
It's more of a wait-and-see approach because as Eric said, you're talking about a group of guys that they played well in spurts. They had moments. They didn't play exceptionally high throughout the course of the season consistently well. And so, I thought it was a troubling sign that it's probably good for Najee Johnson, but I thought it was troubling for that he was taking reps away from guys who played a lot more last year. When you heard Steve Spagnuolo talk about guys making second-year mistakes, it's like you have to look too far to see who he's talking about. Right? It's the guys who probably were playing behind Najee Johnson or losing minutes to Najee Johnson. So, again, I've always felt like they've got some really good talent in the room. The length is great. I think McDuffie is really a really solid player. Snead with this knee thing is kind of interesting, a little bit weird with this inflammation and worry and making sure it's not going to creep up during the season. But I think they've got a mix of players that rely heavily on the pass rush. And so most secondaries look better when the quarterback is under duress. And so for me, that's I think you'll have a much better sense of these guys if you're seeing them without Omenihu on the field, with FAU or Karlaftis going through growing pains. If the pass rush isn't consistent, I think you'll have a better sense of what they're going to be. I think they can be okay, but I'm not going to buy all in right now.
All right, one of the spots we know where there's going to be a new starter, the only spot where there's going to be a new starter, as it turns out, is going to be at safety. Brian Cook is going to be stepping in for Juan Thornhill. Here's what Steve Spagnuolo had to say about Cook so far.
Yeah, so Brian's really got to become the quarterback of the defense, him and Nick, and especially the quarterback on the back end. One good thing about Brian is he's always looking for feedback. Like he came the other day, he wanted to do some more drills. That's one thing that he's got. We saw that when we're looking at him out of Cincinnati. He's working, loves football, passionate about football, and we're banking on him in that regard.
He's kind of known as a strong safety coming out of Cincinnati, right? I mean, you surprised, Eric, that he's the quarterback and not Justin Reed, the veteran?
That was the first thing that stuck out to me was you paid a decent amount of money for Justin Reed. He came in as maybe not a replacement for Tyrann Mathieu, but, a veteran leadership guy at least. And, I honestly, when I was, thinking about who would start for the Chiefs, like I thought Mike Edwards at least had a chance to start over Brian Cook because I don't think Brian Cook was terribly good last year.
Yeah. I'm in the same boat. I mean, I thought the same thing. I thought it was more disconcerting that Edwards can't find his way onto the field. And, I think a lot is made about that AFC Championship game and how much they were able to slow down Joe Burrow. But it's like they were doubling, both receivers in that game. Like that was like the ideal situation you could hope for. And when you're talking about how these guys will match up against Cincinnati again or Buffalo again or what Aaron Rodgers will throw at them. Remember the game Jerry Jeudy had where he just went berserk? And it was like, came out of nowhere. He had like 3 touchdown catches, like second half of the season and just was like unstoppable. And so that is my concern, is that there's a little too much hype about what they are based on what they did last year and not enough reality about, okay, this is they got to play well as a unit. And they got to play well with the guys who are up front to have success. They're going to see a lot of really good offenses.
Other than the interception that Josh Williams had, where Brian Cook did a really good job. Brian Cook played like crap in the AFC title game. Like they had a 4th down where he threw it into double coverage and Cook like got mossed by Jamar Chase. Like I think the T. Higgins touchdown, he was slow to get over on the 2 deep stuff. Like he didn't play great in that game, other than the interception that play he made. And again, it's just one game, but like I think if you go back to Brian Cook's season, like it wasn't like the Harbin, like they're buying into something that's very unknown.
By the way, Mike Edwards called 5 interceptions there. I like this one if we talk about it because there is another wave, the rookie crop of DBs. Who is Chamari Connor? Matt said. He later looked him up and came to the conclusion that he's the 4th round pick, but we haven't heard much of his name. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Steve Spagnuolo did talk today about the rookies.
The young guys, I think, have done a really good job. There's been guys that have stepped up. You've seen them out here. We're moving Chamari around a little bit. Echo's playing a little bit. A lot of those young guys are getting the volume for them is getting huge now. It's about to get really cut way down because when we play this game, they'll have, that much of a game plan going in, and we'll just find out what they can do. But, the mental part of it, we always want to challenge them here. And then in these preseason games to find out what they can do physically, we usually take some of that off of them. Otherwise, we're not going to know where they are athletically in this particular setting.
Chamari Connor was a 4th round pick, corner safety hybrid. It kind of made him sound like he was like L'Jarius Sneed, diet version of L'Jarius Sneed. Went in the same round from Virginia Tech. And then Nick Jones, a 7th rounder out of Cincinnati. And then a guy that gets talked about a lot, and we'll hear Steve Spagnuolo talking about him in a second, is Echo Boydo, I think is how it's pronounced. I apologize to the folks out there from K-State if I'm butchering it, but he's gotten a lot of conversation as well. I don't know if that's just because he went to K-State, and so there's local ties there, but that's kind of their rookie crop of guys. Confidence, Jeff, at all? Should there be any confidence that any of these guys can have a an impact?
Well, I mean, realistically, most of those guys you're talking about, if they're going to make this team, are going to play on special teams. I don't see where there's a lot of opportunity for any of those young guys. If there is opportunity, then I think that's really scary to think of what happened to the guys above them who came into the previous class, because as Spagnuolo said in the previous clip, those guys should be ascending, and this should be a tougher defense for younger guys to find roles in. And I'll even go back to the Brian Cook part. It's just you're talking about asking young guys to play pivotal roles and making calls for you now. And we know how much Spagnuolo was. The reason Daniel Sorensen was playing so much back when he was here was that he knew the defense. He wasn't great at playing the defense, executing it, but he knew it.
He was playing because he hated the Red, Gold, and Bold, the best Chiefs podcast. That's why Daniel Sorensen was playing in 2021.
To give us content, just
to spite us. I mean, the Chiefs are losing 27-3 to the Titans. We needed to talk about something.
Yeah. I don't know, Eric. How much do you expect something from the rookies?
Not much. I mean, I think Jeff's right. Like, I think the Spagnuolo had to be different than he normally is last year, but a lot of times it's hard for the leopard to change his spots, right? Like, so I'm kind of like, I struggle with this idea that they're all of a sudden going to be this rookie, playing rookies teams because they had, success last year. I think that it's going to be slower to go. And I think, last year was kind of a year where they asked, Spags to, step out of his comfort zone, and he was obviously great at it. But I don't think year in and year out they're going to be contributors. I think last year was out of a necessity.
Yeah. I would like to believe that every year you're going to plug in a couple of guys and they're going to be fantastic and do all this stuff. It's just not realistic. It's almost kind of the yin and yang of things. Like, they had such a great draft. It just isn't going to be as good this year. So second year crew better step up. They better be there to play because I don't think you can expect as much from the rookies. And I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing that Echo Boydo is getting all the conversation that he is, but undrafted out of K-State. This is Steve Spagnuolo talking about the rookie.
Yeah, you pinned you hit it right on the nose because he does look a lot more comfortable. Volume's heavy for him right now. His pitch count has gone up in the last week. A, because of guys that have been nicked up, and B, because he's kind of earned it. And he's coming along. He missed all that time we talked about in OTAs, but I think he's making up for it now, and hopefully he'll do that.
This is, listen, part of the reason why we're talking about this is we looked it up, and last year, everyone that they brought to a podium ended up either making the Chiefs practice squad or somebody else's practice squad or the active roster. They brought him to the podium. Now, I do want to point out again, he went to Kansas State, so it's entirely possible this is just throwing some meat at the reporters who wanted to hear from the local guy, but he's pretty damn good at K-State as well. So, I mean, is there a place in this league for undrafted, guys to make it a corner when there are so many guys that get drafted at that spot in the league now, Jeff?
Oh yeah. There's plenty of space. I mean, Chiefs have had a few guys in that category come down the pipeline, and look, I think it's corner, like I just mentioned, what is like for pass rushers and coming from college to pro football. The same is true for corners. You're only going to find there's two types of corners in the NFL. There are guys who are just elite specimen, Patrick Surtain type guys. J.C. Horn is that guy. Just in Carolina, watching him this morning, and they just look like stud players when you see them come out. Marlon Humphrey, and then there are guys who have to be technicians and have to get by on technique, be in the right scheme. And I'm guessing that Echo fits a lot of what Steve Spagnuolo likes. He's probably a smart guy. He's probably where he's supposed to be. He probably understands the calls pretty well and how to play with the people on the back end. And the only thing I'll say, and I was looking up his side, I didn't realize, I don't know the guy's name. I haven't been up to camp at all this year because I've been bouncing around other places. But he's a smaller guy, right? He's 6 feet, about $170. When you start talking about these other guys, the Jalen Watson, the Josh Williams, those guys are like 6'3", 210, 205. And those bigger guys, it's harder for them sometimes to play with the same kind of fluidity and consistency that smaller guys can play with. So I'm guessing what Echo is doing, he's probably just more consistent in his technique and his coverage. And he knows that being undrafted, he can't make mistakes out there. He's got to make plays.
Yeah, no doubt.
And I think, by the way, just to add a little bit to this, I think corner being a position, Petro, you talk about volatility. I think corner being a position that is so hard to evaluate is also another. Like the Chiefs, to their credit, Joshua Williams is not on that. He doesn't have a PFF grade because he's playing Division II, right? So they've somehow found him with their data. But like, I think you think about like Richard Sherman, you think about guys like that, Mike Hilton, guys who are drafted like 5th round and later who end up being good starters. It's largely because we've gotten really good at evaluating defensive and offensive linemen. We've gotten okay at quarterback. We're better at wide receiver than we are corner. And we're frankly terrible as an industry at understanding corner throughout. So an undrafted guy might have more of a shot than at any other position at corner versus other positions.
Yeah. We'll see how it plays out over the long run. We'll see how the wide receiver position plays out. Adam Teicher says he likes what he sees out of the receivers, pleasantly surprised by the receivers. I think at some point we're going to see Travis Kelce back up a little bit. That means some of the tight ends are going to have to pick it up. Maybe the wideouts are going to have to pick it up. And they're not replacing. I think there's a bit of a cumulative effect. Everyone says, well, they were fine without Tyreek Hill, so they'll be fine without Juju. Well, it's Juju and McCole Hardman. And you still got to produce everything you produced last year, right? So it's like there is kind of it's now 3 wide receivers in 2 years. I do think that can be a little bit more of a cumulative effect than maybe, as fans, we just think, well, they got it done last year. They were number 1 offense last year without Tyreek Hill. So now it doesn't matter. They can just plug in anyone they want. I don't think it's that simple. I'm optimistic that they can do a really good job, but are you optimistic that they can be as good at the wide receiver position, losing 3 guys over the last 2 years, not just the 2 they lose this year?
What I think is that when you have the quarterback you have, you can figure it out. But if you ask me right now, will this group be as good as last year's group? I'm not as confident because one guy's already hurt. A key guy's already hurt. Kadarius Toney. I know he's supposed to be back by week 1, but he's still banged up and he's got an injury history. But more importantly, part of me feels like the Chiefs' offense is going to be like the Patriots' offense to a certain extent when Brady was there. There was always every 2 or 3 years a different iteration of it. And it almost feels like with the type of receivers they have right now, it's going to look like the Deion Branch, David Givens type group, or the Danny Edelman, Danny Amendola, Julian Edelman group, where you got these shiftier guys running around. It's not so much down the field throwing because really MVS is the only real true deep threat they have. I know Tony can run, but he's more of a gadget guy right now. MVS is the burner. So I think they're going to do a lot more stuff underneath, a lot more on-time throws, a lot more run after the catch type stuff, and it's going to be something we haven't seen from them in a while. So that, to me, so to answer your point, I think it's more about the group as a whole than 1 or 2 guys really standing out and being dominant players.
I can't believe Jeff forgot Brandon LaFell and David Patton. Sorry, we forgot.
David Patton.
Those were all time, and not to be confused with Rashay Caldwell and Jabbar Gaffney.
Yeah,
just went
down that road too.
Patriots receivers. That would kind of MVS level type receivers.
Can I just say that this is the most dangerous thinking. Mahomes is completing passes to guys like Watson and Kemp in the AFC Championship game. He'll make it work, especially if they can make it happen with the running game a bit. This is the most dangerous thought process I have seen in a long time, and it's ones that have gotten coaches fired and brought teams to a screeching halt. The idea that it'll all be fine over there. It was all just fine on the offense for the Kansas City Chiefs under Dick Vermeil. They don't need any help there. They're all fine. They need help on defense. Draft everything on defense. And the Chiefs did. And the offense got old and went to shit. Okay. So let me tell you something. You have to constantly be putting into your offense. And that idea that Pat will just do it, I'll tell you what else happens. Quarterbacks get pissed off, right? When what good or bad that you found Devontae Adams in the second round, you still pissed off Aaron Rodgers that you never used a first round pick on offense. By the way, that's a direction that the Chiefs are going. I know they tried to trade up and get a wide receiver last year, but they didn't do it. Taking a lot of defensive guys. And at some point right now, it's all cool. But if the receiving core does go to crap, you can't just keep going, oh, Pat will take care of it. Running backs are coming in the 7th round and in free agency. Wide receivers are coming outside the first round. They still have 2 second rounds, which is a pretty good investment. But, they're not taking any tight ends high. Noah Gray's been there. They are investing in the offensive line. That's one thing I will give.
You just walk. Sorry to interrupt you. I'm sorry. You walked right into this, right? Like they spent $60 million guaranteed on the right tackle. They went out and got a veteran, a real left tackle, who's, by the way,
I'm not criticizing
everybody.
No,
Donovan Smith's going to kick Orlando Brown's ass.
Hang on, you're missing my point. My point is the deadly mindset that Temecula has.
But I like to, I love Temecula Hound Dog, great listener to the show. But they're not doing this stuff. That's not they're not saying, oh, we'll just give Pat a bag of baseballs to play with. Like the Rashee Rice is a 2nd round pick. Ricky James is a real NFL.
Yeah, but what if they're not good?
But what if anybody's not good, right? Like, what if Aaron Rodgers isn't good? The Jets are bleeped. That you already used the swear word. I have to, like, the Jets are screwed. If these receivers aren't good, they're not going to be as good. The reason that it worked last year was Juju was a 1,000-yard receiver. MVS did his thing when he had to. And, Justin Watson was pretty solid in his stead and like all this kind of stuff. If everybody in that receiving core goes to 0, Soren, this offense isn't going to be as good. That's the answer. But it's not for lack of trying. They've put this is the best offensive line the Chiefs have had since when? The Brian Waters days?
This season?
Yes.
Best offensive line? Yes, I am quite optimistic that this is going to be their best offensive line since then, yes.
Yeah, because I'm going to tell everybody, Donovan Smith's a better left tackle than Orlando Brown. Newsflash.
Oh, he might be better than Eric Fisher.
Yeah. And then obviously at right tackle, there's a lot of projection there, but the interior is the best in the NFL. Like they put, and then they used a 2nd round pick on a wide receiver. Like they're doing things to keep, to avoid Patrick being a one-man show for sure.
I think the point, I understand what Soren is saying though, is that you don't want to get into a place where, and I think this happened with McCole Hardman, where it's like, hey, the quarterback's great, so the receiver is going to be great. We'll just take some traits. I think there's something to be said for going out and getting guys who are proven to have a certain skill set, which I think Rashee Rice was a perfect example of that. They went out and got a guy who looked a lot like Juju Smith-Schuster and played like him, and hopefully can translate that into the NFL. But this staff has swung and missed receivers before. They've certainly been like every team that wins a championship. There's always the belief that guys come here, they're going to be great, going to be stars, and it's very easy to fall into that trap of thinking the QB will figure it out for you.
The Chiefs somehow the Chiefs have basically from rounds 4 to 7 have the base rate of hits. It's just that one of them was Tyreek Hill. Everybody else, Chris Conley was, I guess, 3rd round. DeMarcus Robinson, J.U. Chason, like all those guys have been Tyreek Hill is the outlier, of course, as any 5th round pick is.
Let's talk a little bit about the injuries that are starting to pile up on this team. Tony and Pacheco, they say, are going to be back for week 1. Pacheco's practicing, but with the no contact jersey. Kadarius Toney, I think the timeline is maybe, is right around that time. L'Jarius Sneed continues to miss time with the knee. Jody Fortson is out with a shoulder. Clyde Edwards-Helaire missed today with an illness. Omenihu suspended. Chris Jones is holding out. That's starting to be quite a bit, isn't it, Jeff? I mean, like, there's still time for the many, not Omenihu and to come back. We know he's going to be suspended. Still time to get all these guys back, but you should start to, not that everybody doesn't have these, but it's kind of a lot when it's Snead, Pacheco, Tony, on top of Omenihu's not going to play.
Yeah, it starts to add up, and it's one of the downfalls of winning a championship. One of the few downfalls is that you don't have as much time. You're going through a longer year. You don't have as much time in the off season to let your body recover. If you're having operations, you probably push them back a little bit, and your rehab takes a little bit longer. So yeah, this is just the natural order of things. But yeah, I do agree with you that it's becoming a little bit disconcerting for you if you're a Chiefs fan, because you know that it's so easy, going back to previous comment about just saying, hey, best quarterback in the league is here, all Hall of Fame coaches here. But a lot of things had to fall in place for them to be what they were last year. And those things don't fall in place if guys are hurt, and they don't fall in place if the guys behind them can't step up and deliver. And so, yeah, it's not. I was talking to I was talking to somebody today. It was a coach or a PR, a personnel guy, about just, it's not like people think the NFL is like, like college football, where it's like Alabama just rolls out a new team every year and you win by 60, or Georgia shows up and you're like dominating. It's like every year you got a different team. And if that team is banged up, it takes a toll on you. So yeah, last year, one of the most underrated parts of their success was their health.
Yeah, I agree. And can I point out, it's not just these injuries; it's that there are more to come.
Coming, yeah.
Right, and they were, I think, pretty injury free last year, which means it's kind of the pendulum swings back the other way the next year. That maybe they're going to have to deal with more injuries. Let me tell you, on September 1st, their injured reserve list last year: Justin Ross, Lucas Niang, Matt Bushman.
Yep.
That was their injured list. Right,
Mm-hmm.
we're not at September 1 yet. There's time for these guys to come back. But if you're down L'Jarius Snead, and Omenihu's out, a guy they're counting on, who's part of the replacement for Frank Clark. I mean, if it was Snead and Frank Clark last year, right? If it was Snead and Karlaftis, it was, take your pick on one of the defensive linemen that they were really counting on. It would look different. They're already, again, time for them to get healthy, but they're already starting the year more banged up, it feels like, than they did last year, Eric.
Well, not only that, but 2021, like, they weren't that good of a team, but they were just healthy. And so 2 years in a row, they've been very, very healthy. And obviously they've capitalized on it more than they probably should relative to a really good AFC. I think that's the other part that makes this concerning, is this is not a conference. Like, I don't know if you guys saw my tweets where I was like, basically tiering out the AFC. Like, there are 4 tiers of good teams in the AFC. Yeah. And so if you are weak at all, corner, wide out, offensive line, defensive line, like, you don't get a ton of relief on that schedule.
Yeah, like one bottom feeder in the conference, one or two bottom feeders in the whole conference.
Yeah, and 2 of them might make the playoff. The Colts and the Texans. We don't know that they play in the AFC South. They could win some games. The Raiders are really the only team in the conference that has no hope.
So,
by the way, how about this? Terry says, haven't heard anything on Yang yet, and you won't till the day they cut it.
Is that news?
Yeah, it is. I mean,
of course.
They paid $20 million to a right tackle because they're like, we're done with this crap.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
that was one I was wrong about, by the way, Petro, that Lucas Niang was going to be a thing.
Yeah. Well, I had a guy tell me he was off another team's board because of the chronic hip issue and different things like that coming out in the draft. But that, that happens all the time. There are guys, I think I heard that maybe L'Jarius Snead was off somebody else's board for health reasons coming out of Louisiana Tech. So that happens all the time. All right. One more from Steve Spagnuolo. We'll close with what we're looking for in this upcoming game. Here's what Steve Spagnuolo is looking for.
Obviously, all the young guys that we don't know anything about, we put them all in the same category. Maybe guys that are getting off nicks and bumps and bruises to see where they're at. None of that. I mean, the guys we know about, certainly, I mean, Coach Reed typically doesn't have them out there too long, but I'm really, I mean, I think I've probably said this every first preseason game. I'm particularly more interested in finding out where we are as a tackling group, where we are at eliminating big plays. I mean, you got to do that stuff first before you even think about being any good.
All right, Jeff. There's Steve Spagnuolo. What he's looking for. What are you looking for?
Quick game. Get over with. as soon as possible. I am not a preseason.
Jeff wants the play clock to be 15
That's
seconds.
right.
In the
Can we get to September
preseason.
7th as fast as possible? No, I mean, look, you want to see some of the guys you mentioned, like, the echoes of the world. You want to see some of these young kids like Rashee Rice, see what they can do. I think there are, I sit here and joke about it, but there are a lot of important jobs on that depth chart that will be looked at in these kind of games, because we've talked about, who's playing tight end outside of Noah Gray, some of these people, the Deneric Princes of the world. These are the guys that we're talking about all the time right now, because we know who the stars are going to be. We know who the guys are going to have to lean on are going to be, but there's a lot of opportunities for young guys to start making names and play pivotal roles. So, yeah, I think it will be interesting to see if these guys we've heard so much about are actually real players.
Eric, what are you looking at?
I want to watch Shane Buechele play. I always liked him in college. I think the new third quarterback rule will mean that he could make the roster. And, you've talked before, Petro, about, is Blaine Gabbert the right guy and everything. Like, one of these years, we might see an actual young guy beat out the veteran. And that would be cool, right? To have an actual, player that they've developed at that position. Deneric Prince is another one. Obviously, Rashee Rice is another. The wide receivers, you want to see who is playing, because that's kind of an indication also, like, how does Richie James play in this game or not? Like, questions like that are interesting, I think, just from a playtime standpoint. And then, yeah, kind of get a look at, the young, edge rushers, right? I mean, FAU's one. He's got to get some pressures against backup tackles.
Yeah, I do want to see the young guys. I think that's the number one thing that we all want to see is how do they look? After hearing so much about Echo Boydo, I want to see him play out there, see what he does. Deneric Prince for sure. Matt Bushman is a guy that's getting a lot of hype too at the tight end position. Matt Derrick said he's going to make the team. When I did Sunday Sound Off with him, or TV spot on Sunday, he was very bullish that Matt Bushman's going to make the team. And with Jody Fortson maybe being down for a while, that certainly opens it for him. FAU needs to look good, man. Like I said, Andy Reid didn't have sterling comments about it. He didn't crush him or anything. That's why I wanted to play those comments from Steve Spagnuolo tonight, because they need him, right? Like they definitely need him. I think, depending upon how long, I think we're all in agreement Chris Jones is going to be in eventually, but I don't know that he's going to be vintage Chris Jones, if he misses all this time at camp. So they need a good rotation and guys playing well on that defensive line. So I think that's something to watch. And of course, all the wideouts, how they fit. And then Patrick Mahomes getting off the field healthy. I like that he plays. I really do. I think it's football. Guys got to play. And I think it's asinine that these quarterbacks, I heard today on one of the talking head shows, I don't know what it's worth about Aaron Rodgers taking 10 snaps. And it's 10 more snaps in a real game that he's taking. They even said, they're going to have a joint practice. That's more valuable than a practice or than a preseason game. Bite my ass. Nothing goes on but a bunch of fights and crap in those things. I've watched those things. Anybody ever seen anything get accomplished in a joint practice? I mean, I think it's noteworthy. Andy Reid never does it.
Hold on. 2000 and what year was that, Jeff? 2007. Wasn't that Tyler Thigpen where he lit the Chiefs up so bad that when Childers tried to slip onto the practice squad that Herm Edwards signed him?
Yeah. Like I said, nothing but bad things happen.
Tyler Thigpen.
I actually like Tyler Thigpen. Pretty good guy to talk to.
Probably a good backup quarterback.
Yeah.
The problem is the Chiefs didn't have a starting quarterback.
Yeah, there it is. All right, that's going to do it for us here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. Tell your friends, people, hit the like button, smash it if you would. Love, tell everybody about it. That's an important part of the equation. For us, don't cost you nothing. So if you would do it, we'd appreciate it. Of course, call our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. They're the best. Great people, local KC company. They've been curing parking lot problems since 1994. They're the best in the business. Every project comes with a written warranty. No commissions, in-house crews. Plus, it's getting ready to be cold weather weather. So if you're going to do that parking lot sealing, I really encourage you to go quickly. Their spots are filling up fast. One of the fastest growing companies in Kansas City. Why? Happy customers. That's why. It's Gann Asphalt and Concrete, online at GannAsphalt.com. So for the traveling Jeff Chadiha, straight out of Jacksonville, Florida, Merrick Eager from a ghost house. People were speculating about the reflections in the windows back there. My name is Soren Petro. Saying thank you very much for joining us here on the Red Gold and Bold podcast.